Hi, in this tutorial we'll be modelling and animating this fire extinguisher from start to finish. We'll be covering some polygon modelling, volume builder modelling, spline dynamics, emitters, cloners and effectors, so we've got a lot to get through. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see any other tutorials in particular. Please remember to like, subscribe and tap the notifications bell to find out when I post new videos. Okay, let's get started. Right, let's start off by bringing in a capsule, and then I'm going to make the radius of that 52, the height 290, the segments I'm going to make that 6, and then the cap segments I'm going to take that right down to 2, and the rotational segments I think I'll make that 8. So we just kind of got this shape we're going to start off with. We're going to make that editable, and then if I go in the side view, I'm going to go into point mode, and what I'm going to do is select, because we want the base of the fire extinguisher, so I'm going to select those points, and the size here of 52, that's the size between the top and the bottom point. So if we make that 0, it just flattens those out. So I'm just going to then move them up, so I've kind of got some equal weighting between these points, and if you see underneath, see we've got that kind of flattened section. Okay, so this is going to go in a subdivision surface, so let's just put that in, and then we can see it's rounded that out nicely. So now we need to do the top, so let's zoom in. Let's turn off subdivision for a moment. Now what I want to do is go into the polygon mode, and then I'm going to get this loop cut tool, and I'm going to use that to kind of cut a section which is going to be the bit that sticks out the top of the extinguisher. So if I just select a point, and see here you can drag where you want that to go. So I'm going to make that about like 60%. You can, over here you can actually type it in. Now press space to kind of lock that in. Then what I want to do is go into this loop selection, then I'm going to extrude. Now if I extrude up like this, you see it kind of goes up and out, and that's not the shape we want. So what I like to do is just offset it by tiny amounts, so say like 0.1, and then I'll actually just go into the normal move tool, and then I can drag that up. So I'm going to move that up like about 15, and then I'm going to do the same trick of the size. I'm going to offset that to 0, so that we've got a straight edge there. If I look at what that looks like, what I want to do is get that loop cut tool again, and I just want to kind of tighten up this top bit. So I'm just going to put a little cut in there just to tighten that up. Now we're going to the line tool, and I'm just going to select this loop here, and what I want to do is just kind of get a nicer shape at the top. So if I zoom in, I'm just going to scale this up a little bit, maybe like that, and then maybe bring it down a tiny amount. So if I go into shading mode, I just want to get like a nicer curve there, so you can kind of change this to kind of get exactly the right shape that you want. So I think maybe like that. I'm happy with that. Okay, so that's like the basic shape of the fire extinguisher. So let's bring in a tube. Now this is going to be that kind of strap around the top. So I'm going to scale down this. I think we'll probably make this like 52. I'm going to add a fillet on there. Maybe make this about 3. Actually, I'll make it a little bit smaller. Just bring that in. Let's zoom in. Now, the reason I'm making it a tube is because you may want to, you know, create an internal version of this, so you know where you can actually see the inside. So if you had the strap just literally on the outside, then you've got the option to do that. I'm not going to put this in a subdivision, so I'm just going to up the rotational segments to like 100, and I might actually make that internal just a little bit thicker, so like 45. Yeah, so it's cutting in a little bit, but if you were going to make an internal section, you'd probably kind of extrude the whole inner of this object. And what I'll do is actually we'll change the height to like 15, and I'm just going to move that up about there, 75 in the Y. Right, so now we've got to make this kind of top section of the extinguisher. So let's just zoom in. So this section is made of multiple parts. So what I'll first do is we'll call the tube, I'll call that strap. and we'll call this main for now. Just then group those. I'll call that like main section, just so I've got it grouped. So I want to create this bit at the top. So let's first create a cylinder. Now what I'm going to do is put these together with a volume builder, a mesher. But if you haven't got that, what you could do is probably just round off all the edges, and it's so small you probably wouldn't notice, but it's got some nice detail if you wanted to you know, do some close-up shots. So for this cylinder, I'm going to like just position it at the top there. I'm going to give it a radius of about 18 and a height of 8, and then I'll probably up the rotational segments to 50. Like I say, I'm not going to add on rounding on this bit, but if you wanted to, then that would, you know, if you didn't have the volume builder, then that's probably what you would do. I'll probably make it about 150 in the height. So it's kind of quite tight there. And then this is going to be covered up, I think. So let's just call this like, what should we call this? We call it like nozzle base. So then we want to create that inner part of that. So let's make this a bit thinner. So like 12, let's say 40 in the height. And then in the position, we'll say like 165. So it's about there. Now you can see that the top of that cylinder is cutting in, so we've already still got those polygon selected, so I can just bring that down. Okay, now I want to do this kind of like cross section that goes on. So let's call this nozzle main, and we'll duplicate that again, and let's rotate this by 90 degrees. And then I probably want to make this one, let's think, like a radius of 9. And then the height, we'll say 60. And then I want this to kind of be centered up in between the top and bottom of here. So maybe about like there, right? Now we want to add on some additional parts. So I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to scale this down, and this is just kind of what looks nice to you. So let's just change the radius of that to maybe like 12, bring that along, and then this is going to be like the front of the nozzle, so where the pipe comes out. So I'll just duplicate that and make that a bit wider. So that's that. I think on the other end I might actually grab all 3 of those parts and just shift that along a bit like that, so it kind of got longer on that side. And these parts I'll name, oh actually yeah, I'll group them together and call that like pipe attach. And this is just so you can kind of keep track of everything. I'm going to put a little sphere on the end just for some additional detail. So let's go under this one. Just call this long so I can keep track of it. I'm going to use my PSR just to center it up. Then we're going to scale that down and bring it along. Scale that up. That's got a little bit of detail there. And then we want this kind of cross section where this kind of pressure gauge is going to go. So I'm going to duplicate that long. I'm going to rotate that 90 degrees. Then I want to center it up with that middle pipe, so I can go to the main. Oh, it's positioned it, but it's changed the rotation. So let's just rotate that 90 again. So I want this one to be a bit thinner. So let's just make this maybe like a radius of 6, and then 40 in the height. I'll center that up roughly. Kind of want just a little bit poking out the back and then most of it out the front, because this is going to be the pressure gauge. So to add that pressure gauge on, let's just we'll call this like pressure stalk, and then we'll get another cylinder. Actually no, we can just duplicate that one, and then this one I'm going to give that radius of 16 and then depth of 5, so it's quite small. And then for the caps, I'm just going to add caps on just to give it some rounding, and I'm just going to push this to the end. And when we do the volume builder, this is going to give us some nice curves and nice shapes here. So we'll call this pressure back, and then I want a tube. So this is going to be kind of the dial edge, and I can PSR that to the center of that cylinder. And let's just scale this down. We probably want to make this the same outer radius, or maybe a little bit bigger actually. Let's say that's 18. And internally I'll make it 13. And then I want to add a fillet on there. I want to up this. If I just go with a large number, it'll just make the fillet as kind of curved as possible. It can't go any more curved than 2.5. So let's just extend this. I'll just change the height. Let's say like 12. And then this is going to be our cap. And our kind of pressure gauge will go in there. So there's all the parts. Now, like I say, you could smooth that out if you wanted to, you know, if you didn't want to use a volume builder, you could just put curved edges on here. But what I'm going to do is put this in a volume builder. So just take that off. Let's call this pressure edge. Let's get a volume builder, a mesher. And I just want to center these to that nozzle base, just so I've got sort of like the right rotation if I wanted to move this down the line. Put both of these in. Let's grab everything, stick that into the volume builder. Obviously we've got a really high voxel size, so I'm going to put this quite low, down to like 0.5. And now we've got this nice sort of like clean model wherever it goes into it. Obviously we've got some rough edges on here, so we can adapt this. We can, on this pressure edge, we can up those rotational segments. And then what we'll also do is add on a smooth layer up the top. I think I'm going to make this like 1, and then I'm going to make this like 80%, just to kind of tighten it up a little bit. But you see, now we've got this nice kind of solid object. And what we want to do is obviously cut a hole in the end there. So let's go to this, any one of these, I guess. Let's call this hole. And then what we'll do is just scale down there, extend that out, and then we'll add that back in to the volume builder underneath the smooth, but we'll say subtract. Let's have a look. Yep, there we go. So now we've got our nice hole there. Then what I'll also do, actually, you know what, I'm gonna, looking at the curves there, I don't think this strap is as curved nicely. I'm gonna call this nozzle. And then for my strap, I'm actually gonna probably make the outer radius a little bit bigger. Yeah, and then make that kind of a bit smoother. Maybe I will scale that down because we're not actually going to see inside this option. Now, to smooth the actual main canister itself, we can just up the subdivision editor, you know, and that gives you kind of a more subdivisions, so it's nice and smooth. Okay, cool. So another couple of little things to finish on this dial. Let's just save. So let's just go into the nozzle and let's get that pressure back. Let's copy that. I can turn off the caps because we don't need it. We just want this to kind of sit inside. This is just going to probably be like a white color to stand out from the gauge itself. What I might then do is copy that again, make the radius quite small, maybe like 1. Maybe we'll put the fillet caps on. Let's just bring this out, and this is going to be the center of our gauge. Maybe 2. And then we can up that radius just for the maximum. And the height will just like maybe change that to 5. No, 10. Just so it's sticking out. And then we want to actually make that little pressure gauge. So let's go into a front view. Oh no, we don't want front, we want right maybe. Left, the last one, always the last. Okay, so let's bring in circle. We want to make this quite small. Let's just give this a radius of like 5. Just bring it up for the minute so we can look at it, compare it. Maybe we'll make this like 3, make that editable, and we'll just grab the top one, extend it out, and then if you want to change these Bezier curves, you can grab them, bring them down, just to kind of make it like a point. Just play around with that. And we'll just extrude that out. Let's give that like 4, no, wrong. 4 that way, and then we'll add some caps on, so some fillet caps. Obviously that's far too big. Let's change the radius to like maybe 1. Actually less than that, 0.5. I'm gonna say constrain, and then maybe up this to like 5 and 5, just to give it a little bit of rounding out. And then what I should have done, put the extrude underneath the circle, give it a PSR, because that circle is going to be the center, complete center. Add that back in. We'll call this arrow, whatever. I know that's not right. And then call this one center, and we'll call this like face. And I want to make sure that's centered up with this. So that PSR obviously is just added on some rotation, but we just need to make sure we go back to 0. I just want to make sure it's on the correct center point. Obviously too deep, so let's just change that to like 2, maybe even 1. Yeah, that's it. We'll bring this in. There's our little pressure gauge. We'll just get the point tool, and let's just pull this down a little tiny bit. So there's our little pressure gauge, and we'll bring that center in. Okay, cool. Right, so that's kind of like quite a big part of the build done. So we'd need to build the handle, and then we want to do the pipe and the end of the pipe, and then we can do the animation for this. So before I do that, let's just do a little bit of tidying up. Let's just group all of these together, because these are all part of the nozzle. Okay, so let's do this handle. Okay, a cube. Bring this up, and I'm going to kind of do this so it's kind of representative, just something that kind of looks nice. We don't need it to be super exact because it's quite small in the animation. We want it to kind of have enough kind of geometry to show what's going on. So I'm just going to make this cube. Let's make it about that size, say. And what is that? Let's call this 22. Let's call it 11, no, 12. Call that 22. Okay. I'm going to make that editable. And I'm going to grab the polygon tool, and let's just look at the side a little. I'm going to extrude that out. Now when you do extrusions, you want to make sure that create caps is turned off here, because otherwise it will kind of make a cap on the inside. So when you subdivide it, it messes it up. So make sure create caps isn't on, unless obviously you have a flat surface and you want to extrude that. So you do want 2 caps. So with that done, I'm going to do a couple of bits. I'm going to put another cut here, say 75%. I'm going to scale down here, and then maybe move that down a little. So this is our kind of bottom handle that's kind of stuck, and then we'll kind of duplicate this and make our top one. So let's just set this up. So I'm going to do this quite simply. Let's just get our loop path cut tool, and I'm just going to roughly say, right, okay, I want a cut there and a cut there, and let's say cut there at the bottom. So we want to cut out this section in the middle. So the way I'm going to do that is actually I'm going to delete this, and then I'm going to grab these two and extrude these down. And you'll see that obviously we've got a bit of a mess here. It's not connecting, but we can fix that. So I've extruded those down. Let's just move that down a little bit further. Then I'm going to select this polygon, and then obviously we need to connect these parts. So I'm going to go into the line tool. Am I calling that right? Edge mode. Okay, I'm going to edge mode, sorry. Use it so much, but don't know what they're called. And then I'm going to get this tool, which is stitch and sew, which you can get up here in mesh. Where is it? Commands, create. There we go, stitch and sew. So with that tool selected, we can grab, make sure it's actually selected. We can grab the top one and see, create that line between that one and the next one, and then we let go, connects them together. So now we've got a connected object. Now, just to make sure that all of those points are connected, I'm going to select all. I'm going to click optimize. Now, the optimize tool just means if there's any points that are super close together, it will just kind of weld them and make them one point. So we put a subdivision surface on this. You can see what we're looking at. So it looks a bit rough around the edges, but it's because we just need to kind of tighten up some areas. Let's get the loop cut tool. Now I'm just going to make some cuts along here just to kind of tighten this up. I don't want it to be too tight because we're kind of going for this kind of molded, kind of soft kind of look, so I don't want it to be super tight. Might put a cut in here just to tighten that up there, and then maybe we'll put a cut maybe that there, and that's probably enough for the bottom half of our handle. So now we want to kind of recreate that for the top. So what I might do is I'll call this handle base, just duplicate that, and we'll call this handle top. And this one I want to actually reset the PSR on the subdivision surface because we want this handle to rotate. So let's just make sure that is set, and then we want to rotate that 180. Okay, then we just want to change a couple of things. So let's go into point mode, and then I'm just going to select the points on one side and pull them out. And actually we can look at this on here. I just want them to kind of sit outside of that bottom part of the handle. And I'll select the points on the other side, do the same, just pull them out, kind of just doing this by eye. And then the top, what we want to do is probably get the whole handle, move it up, move it back a bit so that that back section kind of overlaps. And if I go back into point mode, let's just kind of tweak this a bit. So I want this to kind of all point up. So I'm just going to just change these slightly like that. And then I might just change this. I might just bring this up. Just give it a bit more detail. Move these around. So this is just, I'm just doing this by eye. I might grab that end section here, just pull these out a bit to kind of give it a bit of a point. Yeah, and then maybe I'll bring, I'm selecting the points on the back and the front. Maybe I'll bring this down. Actually, maybe I'll bring that down as well, like that. Maybe I'll tweak this. Okay. That kind of gives us, you know, it kind of looks like a rough sort of handle. That back section is obviously cutting in. I mean, we're not going to see it, but if you wanted to, you could move it up. And let's have a look what this looks like. What we could, I mean, we could move these parts back, maybe. If we wanted to give ourselves a little hole. I'm not saying that's the tidiest, but could do that. But we're not actually going to see it, so I'm just going to put that there. And then the pivot point, obviously at the moment, is set to where that is, so that's our pivot point. What I might do is just to add another little detail, we'll just get a capsule under that handle top. I'm just going to set the PSR, scale this down, maybe set this to +X. Let's just scale down this pin. So we've got like a little pin breaks between the two. Scale that up. Actually, what I might do is get a cylinder. PSR that. That's +X. And take both of these out. This cylinder, I'll scale that down. Bring that out. Oh, no, wrong one. Just like that. So Can add some caps to that, a little bit of fillet, give that a 1, and then yeah, we've just got a little bit of extra detail. Maybe I'll get that handle and bring it down even further. Go into that side view. I'll just bring that down like that, so it kind of looks like that pivot point is in the center. So now we could group all of those, and they've all got the same pivot point, so it's going to keep that for our group. And we'll call this handle top, and that will then rotate for our animation. Okay, so that is done. Right, so now we want to create the pipe. So to do that, let's save, and we'll go into a top view. Now for the pipe, we want to use a spline. I just want 2 points, so I'm just going to get the pen tool. I'm going to select from roughly where the center of the nozzle is. I'm going to pull out a Bezier, and then I'm going to select another tool, another point, something like that. Okay, let's have a look at that. We want to get it in roughly the right position, so let's just bring it up to the nozzle. So yeah, it kind of looks roughly centered. We can tidy this up in a little while. And let's just move this point. So this is going to be our hose, and we're going to do some spline dynamics on this spline, so we can kind of move it around, and so we can obviously connect that end to it as well. So let's obviously create the part of the pipe first. So let's create a circle. Let's create a sweep, and to that sweep we're going to add the circle and the spline. The circle is obviously far too big, so let's scale that down. We just want to make sure that, yeah, it's kind of fitting into that tube. That end point of the spline, we're just going to need to, in point mode, just make sure that's lined up. Yeah. Now my spline, I'm going to change this to uniform, and I'm going to make this like 100 maybe. Yeah, just so we've got a nice smooth animation, because as well as smoothing out the actual spline itself, we're going to be running animated objects down here, so we want to make sure it's set to uniform, so it's got uniform motion. Right, so that is that. Now the next thing we want to do is probably this tube. It's going to be transparent, but I want it to actually be a pipe rather than just a solid, because the objects inside will refract differently whether it's a pipe or whether it's a solid glass object. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate that circle, and let's just turn these off. Actually no, let's turn that on. And this circle, I'm gonna, so that was 7.4, so let's say 6.5, so I'll make it smaller. Put that within here. Now to group these together, I'm going to get, where is it, our spline mask tool, and this will basically group these two together. So if I put these in here, we don't want a union, we want an A subtract B. So see, now we've got a pipe rather than a solid object. Okay, so I think I'm going to save at that point. And to make that cone at the end and make sure it actually sits in the right position, we're going to actually reuse this spline a lot. So let's just give this a rename. We'll call this like master spline, and we'll call this pipe. So let's create this cone that sits at the end. So I'm going to get a cone, just move this somewhere else just so we can see what's going on, and we'll change these settings. So I think the top radius will make about 7, the bottom 21, and then we'll want a height of about 60. And then we do not want caps, so we can turn that off, so we've got kind of like a funnel. And then we're going to want that to kind of have some thickness, but so yeah, to do that, I'm going to go up here to simulate to cloth. I'm going to get a cloth surface, put the cone in the cloth surface. Subdivisions, I'm going to turn that down to 0. What we actually want is just this thickness. So if I turn this up to 1, now we've got some actual thickness to that cone. And then we want like maybe a connection between the cone and the end ring. So I'm just going to get the outer ring here of this, because I can use this to resize. I'm going to put that in the cone, set the PSR. Let's just move the position of this and see what we're looking at. Actually, I don't want to do that. No, we want to get a tube. PSR that, and let's just scale this down. See, it doesn't. We don't want that in the cloth surface. I just want to use that as a guide for the PSR, so we know it's all centered up. Scale this right down. Okay, and then probably add on a fillet. Maybe we'll make this a little bit thicker, a little bit deeper, something like that. That's our cone where all of our particles are going to come out from. So we want to attach this to the end of that pipe, and then when we move the pipe around, we want the cone to also move. So let's group these two together. Oh, the cloth surface is off, so just for my OCD, let's just keep all this together. Let's just group these two objects, and we'll call this cone. Now I want the position here, because we're going to lock this, I want to move this up so it's kind of in that kind of join section. And now we want to attach it to that pipe. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to add on a tag and align to spline tag. And the spline we want to align to is our master spline. So let's drag that in. We see it's in the wrong place. So the position we want this to be in is at 100. And then tangential, we'll turn that on. Actually, no, we'll turn that on. Our positioning isn't correct. So what I'll probably do is just group these two objects together and call this cone group, for instance. And then I'm just going to rotate this by 90 degrees. Set that PSR because I want that to be centered. Let's just rotate this round. 90. Oh no, 90. And then just move this along. So now that's sitting in. So I get this master spline and grab that end point and move that around. You see, now we're moving the pipe and we're moving the cone all as one, so we can animate that. So we can probably start setting this up for animation now. So we've got a couple of things going on. We're going to have this move round, this move up and down, and then we want some random or some motion on the pipe, but then we want all of the particles to kind of shoot down this tube and then come out of here. So we're going to do it as part of a bit of a trick actually. We're going to have some particles come down here, and then we're going to have these animated particles coming out here. So I think the first thing we'll do is probably set up the spline as a spline dynamics and set up that animation, because obviously that's going to affect everything else. So with that master spline selected, let's just go to hair tags, and we want spline dynamics. And now if we were to press play, I'm going to save. If we press play, yeah, the whole thing just collapses. See, we don't want that. So what we want to do is we want to lock certain parts of the spline to parts of the model. So let's first, on our spline, select this point at the end. Now this point, we want to stick it to something. So the thing we could probably stick it to is we've got these rings that we created up here for our nozzle. So let's pick, we had this hole. So let's pick that one, duplicate that. Let's just, we'll just put that in the nozzle, but we'll just call this like center ref. So it's our like center reference. I'm going to make that tiny small. I just want the height to be like 1. And I'm going to bring it just to like the end here. So kind of like where the point is, center reference. Yeah, so the end of our spline is kind of there. So I want to stick this to that. I'm going to hide this. And then for our spline, what we want to do is get another tag. Under hair tags, we want to get a constraint. And oh no, sorry, that should be up here. So we want a constraint on our master spline. So we've got our point selected that we want to constrain. And then our object you want to constrain to is this center reference. Okay. So all we do is just click set. And now that should be locked to that. I think. So let's see. If I press play. Yeah, see, so now it's locked. So the rest of the spline is just like collapsing and rotating. So let's just go back. Oh, I've undone that. So let's put that in again. Press set. So now we want something over here to lock to. So we don't want to lock to this because this is being controlled by the placement of the spline. So we actually want a null object that we're going to then animate. So on the cone, well, actually we've got objects here already. So if we just like duplicate this and delete everything, see we've got this null position. So we can call this like control. Turn our pipe. Oh no, we'll leave our pipe off. So that's our control, and the display for that I'm going to change to a hexagon and make that like 20 just so we can kind of see it. So we want to lock our spline to this control. So on our spline master again, let's go to tags, hair tags, and constraint. I'll just put this at the end just so it's tidy. So we want to select this point, and then under object, we want to put in our control. Press set. Now if we press play, we've got no motion. And the reason that is, if I go back, press play, I can now move this and you see it animates. So let's start getting some initial animation in here, and then we'll do the dynamic stuff. So let's zoom out and kind of start setting up our position. So I want to make sure that our particles go out of frame. So I'm going to put in a camera. I'm going to change my view to tele. So I've kind of got that isometric-y kind of view, and I'm going to have it so the particles shoot out. Maybe this kind of isn't the right angle. I might want it pointing a bit more up, because also I've got to have particles coming out. So let's maybe something like that, so that our particles will come out and kind of go up into the air. See how that looks. Yeah, maybe we'll push this. Oh, get our control. We can actually move that around. Oh no, object. Oh yeah, so you see it's kind of jumping to that point. So what we need to do is when we render, we need to make sure that we kind of give it a run up so it can kind of get into position correctly. So I'm just going to move this back a little bit. So we're locked. Go into here. I think we can set an initial point. There we go, set initial. There you go. So now we've moved it and it's not going to do that jump. Right. So with that being done, yeah, let's get this animation going. So let's get the position. So I think I'm going to have it about there. And what I might do is put a protection tag on the camera so that the camera doesn't move. Let's save that. And with this control, I think what I'm going to do, I just want an up and down animation on it. So I'm going to use a vibrate tag, put a regular pulse on, enable position. Let's say like 60 in the Y, and let's say a frequency of like 0.25. So if we press play, you can see what that's doing. Now you see that the cone is kind of dragging behind. Now I think a way we can do that is because it's kind of the way it's stacked here. So the cone might need to go at the bottom, so it's kind of underneath the pipe. There you go. So it's moving, the control is moving the pipe, and then the pipe is moving the cone, whilst before it was control. And it's actually the way they're layered actually does affect the way that it renders. So that's our up and down motion. Maybe that's probably like too much. Let's maybe we'll make this like 30. So it's just doing a little bit of motion. So I just want that to go up and down. We could do it. Let's try. yeah, we'll do a little bit of back and forth as well. So it's just doing a tiny bit of motion. Now, what I want to do is have this press down and maybe the pressure gauge to move as that's pressing down. So I'm going to do that using a using a cloner. So let's get that handle top. With that selected, I'm going to go MoGraph cloner. Actually, I want to put it in here, just make sure that's, yeah, PSR'd, it's in the right place. Put the handle top in there. We don't actually want any copies, we just want to use it so that we can animate it. So let's call that handle top. Get the capital. And then we want to kind of move this around. So let's go into our nozzle. Go to our arrow. I'm going to do the same for that. Let's get another MoGraph and put our arrow in there. And again, we just want one. So we want to animate both of those. So to do this, I'm just going to go get an effector, plane effector. Under parameters, we just want to change rotation. So maybe let's try. Maybe we want to push it down like that. Is it cutting? Just make sure it's not cutting into the top part of the handle. No. So that's going to push down, and then all our particles are going to come out, and then so when they've come out, then it will come back up again. So we're going to do that with we're going to use a linear fall off. So let's bring in a linear. Let's move this through. What I might do actually is set the initial position to be even more rotated. So maybe we'll go like, maybe that's the starting position. And then, oh, now we can increase the amount of rotation in our plane effector. Maybe we'll make that minus 30, 35, maybe 32. Okay, right. And we'll call this handle rotation. And then to start off with, I'm going to go on the first frame, and for our linear field and the coordinates, we're going to move it through the X. So let's just make sure it's not touching. I'm going to set that there at 28. Move along maybe like 10 frames, and then I'm doing this the wrong way around. Okay, at 10 frames we want it there. First frame we want it not pressed, and then we can set a keyframe for that. So that's our press. So at the same time I want the kind of gauge to move as well. So I'm gonna get here the arrow or gauge, and then for this one we're going to do MoGraph effector, plane effector, and we're going to call this like arrow move. And for this we want some rotation. Oh, we can turn off position, we just want rotation. We just want to get the right rotation. So let's maybe make this like 90 degrees. And for the effector for that, I'm probably going to use the same linear field as the handle rotation, and I'm going to group these together. I'm going to call these effectors. I've got them all in one place. Then under the arrow, under the fall off, let's grab the same linear field, press play. There you go. Oh, it's not coming all the way across, it's not touching that as well. So maybe let's just move that linear field just so it covers that as well. Maybe I'll extend this out a little bit. Then we'll set that keyframe. We'll move back. Just make sure it's not touching. Yep. And I'm going to hide that field. Don't see it, so we'll go with pressing. And then for both of those, I'm going to get a MoGraph effector. We're going to get a delay. And I'm going to change this to spring. Let's maybe make this like 65%, see what that looks like. There you go. And then we'll see when we'll work out how quickly the bubbles go, and then we'll make them bounce back up again, basically. Actually, we'll do that now. So and then we can always change the position. I'm just going to grab these keyframes, make a copy. This is me holding down, is it Alt? See, sorry, I'm moving between Mac and PC, so I need to make sure I'm getting the right key. So Control, going to move this along. Let's move it to like 75. And then I'm going to just rotate these frames. So flip them over. So if we play through, got our press, then our depress. But I think the depress is probably going to actually happen sooner. But once we've figured out the animation of the cloner, then we can make that match up. Okay, let's save that for now. Right, now for this cloner, we want all the particles to come down, or the clones to come down the pipe. So to see what's going on, let's actually make the pipe an X-ray. This is just in the render view, just so we can kind of see what's going on. Now let's create a sphere. I'm going to make this about 2 centimeters, so quite small. We'll get a cloner, add the cloner to the sphere to the cloner, and I'm going to make this an object. And the object is again going to be our master spline. So you see now it's going along there. Now we want to animate them kind of popping out of here, shooting along, and then disappearing in here. And then what we're going to do is have an emitter coming from here, which can have the same color and size cloners, and they're going to kind of like spread out and float up. So let's bring this down. I'm going to add that delay to there just so we can kind of keep track of everything. I think I might just group all of these bits together and call this fire extinguisher for short. And our effectors, then we've got our like clones pipe. Okay, right, so now we want these to kind of animate coming out. So we're going to do this using the offset. Now we don't want to loop because we don't want to offset them and they come out the end again. We just want them to disappear. And we're going to animate this, see this end? So let's bring this down to 0. I'm going to go to frame like 10 and set a keyframe for offset and end. I'm going to go to frame 20, and on frame 20 I'm going to change end to 100. Yeah, so it's kind of like shooting out. But then the offset, I'm going to go to frame 60, and then I'm going to animate that. So we're shooting out and it's going into the funnel at the end. I'm going to go to the timeline, and for that cloner pipe, I'm just going to make sure they're linear keyframes. I press play. There we go. You see it's pressing and going out, and we can see, you know, when this is pressing down, there you go, they're shooting out. They're kind of just like appearing at the moment. But we can maybe push the line back in a little bit. That's obviously going to change everything. So let's. I'm not going to do that because they're shooting out from inside of here anyway. But I do want to have them not just come from nowhere, and I want to add some randomness in here. So let's add a random effector, and we'll call this like sphere random. And I'm going to add that into this effectors box there. And all we want to change in that random is the scale. I'm going to set uniform, absolute, and set this to 1. So that will kind of set this to 1. So that sets that. And then I want to change the number of clones. They're on 10 at the minute. Let's change this to like 100. So I've got a whole bunch of them, and then just watch that. There you go. So they're kind of shooting out. But see, we're starting with actually seeing them there from the very beginning. And obviously when we do our loop, they're not, we want them to not be there at the beginning because they're not there at the end. So what I'm going to do is go to MoGraph and add a shader. And we'll call this sphere shader, just to keep track of everything. And I'm going to set a scale of -1, so just make everything disappear. And then under shading, let's add a gradient. And for our gradient, black, it should be when we see them, white when we don't. So at the beginning of the like the beginning of this spline, they're not seen, and as they move on, they're going to scale up. Maybe I'll just do it like that, so it looks like, see, they're shooting out, so they're getting shot out of the nozzle, and then they end up over here. Right, so let's work on our emission. So let's get go to simulate particles. We want an emitter, and I'm actually going to set this underneath our control and set the position, scale, rotation, just so it's kind of pointing in the right direction roughly. Go to perspective. Now let's just scale this right down, maybe 20 by 20, and let's kind of get this roughly in position. Might even need to be smaller than this. I just want to kind of angle it correctly. Get kind of roughly centered. Maybe scale that down a little bit more. Now if I press play, you see it's just sending out like particles. They're not going at the right speed, they're not doing exactly what we want, and they're not interacting with anything. So we need to do a few things to set that up. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just up the number of particles. I'm going to make this 40 in the editor and in the renderer, just so I can see exactly what we're doing. I'm going to start the emission at frame 10, because even though this is pushing out, it's going to take maybe a second before these are seen, so we kind of get the illusion that it's these being pushed out. I'm going to change the stop emission to 50. Lifetime I'll say 100, but it's going to be going off frame hopefully. The speed I'll set to 20. And then let's just press play and see what we're looking at. So you see it's coming out there, but it's not coming out the right speed or anything. So we need to make a couple more changes. We're going to let's add in our cloner. So we can actually duplicate these pipe clones and call these clones dynamic, because we know that we're going to have the same like sizing, effects and colors on them, and we'll set the colors up when we do the materials. So with the clones dynamic, let me just put them here. We want to still do object, but rather than the spline, our object is actually going to be the emitter. So this is so we can kind of cache everything down the line as well. So let's just press play. You see they're coming out, but they're still doing that kind of random slow motion. So, and also it's not interacting with this cone. So we need to add onto here a dynamics tag, like a simulation tag. We can go rigid body, in collision, we say apply tag to children under say all. And let's press play and see what that looks like. They're all just falling, but at least we know we've got gravity and stuff working. We want to add a tag onto our cone so that they obviously don't go straight through it. We want them to fall out, so or come around it. So let's find the cone. There it is. And there's our cone. And actually, while I'm here, I think I might put a subdivision surface on here to kind of make it a bit more rounded. So let's let me PSR that. I don't want to ruin anything, put that in there. Yeah, just give it a bit more of a rounded surface. I might change the subdivision to 1, and maybe we'll up the thickness to 2. There we go. So yeah, we've got like a nicer kind of edge, and that means I'll also have to scale this, bring that out. Yeah, so that's cool. Right, so then we obviously want this to interact. So let's grab we'll say the cloth surface, because that one's got less subdivisions, and we'll go tag simulation, and we'll go collider body. And for this, I think static mesh might be correct. Let's just press play. It's kind of correct, but they're all falling out the end, but we're going to fix that, because I think the next thing we need to do is we're going to get rid of gravity. So we're going to edit project settings. You see we have dynamics here. Under the dynamics tab, we've got gravity. I'm going to set that to 0, because we're going to control the emissions with wind rather than with gravity. So we've already got it's kind of starting to happen, but you see they're kind of, because there's no gravity or there's nothing pushing them in any particular direction, they're kind of going all over the place. So let's go to simulate no, not there, thinking, oh, particles, if I can find it. We'll get wind, and all we need to do is, you know, push this in the right direction. So we want them to go up. So let's just rotate this by 90 degrees if my mouse will let me. Okay, there we go, rotated 90, and I'll just up this to like about 6. It doesn't need to be directly under, but let's just, for safety, for neatness' sake, oh, I've done PSR'd it. Let's just set that in the center, just for neatness. Now let's press play. That's it, it's working. And you see we're kind of getting that illusion of them being pushed through and then coming out the end. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm kind of happy with that. So let's, with our clone dynamics, if I scrub back and forth, you see it's going to kind of all mess up and not quite work. But what we can do is actually, we can go to MoGraph tags and add a MoGraph cache, and then we can bake this animation. Now if we play it back, see, there we have it, and it's all working. Now it's just not catching the last few frames. So I'm using this just for the tutorial, not for my Instagram, which is, I keep to 100 frames usually. I don't necessarily need to do that. There's two options you could do. You could speed up the wind so that they move up faster. You could reduce the number of clones so they kind of disappear faster. All I'm going to do is just go to project settings. Actually no, I need it to loop because I've got this up and down motion, so I do need it to be 100 frames. So I am going to increase the wind. So let's change that to 7, and I just want to make sure they all get out of frame by the end of 4 seconds. There you go, done. Okay, so that was fine. I might actually, with these dynamic clones, they look quite nice. I might actually up the number. Oh no, I'll have to do it in the emitter. So we've got 44, let's try 50. I'll push my luck and see what we're dealing with. So I just want to make sure it goes above this line before the end. Yeah, I'm going to try 60. Kind of looks impressive the more you have. Nice. And what I might do is actually just tilt that wind a little bit so that they're not just going directly up, but maybe they're getting pushed outwards. Yeah. So that looks nice. Now, you could obviously, let me just try and see what it looks like if they're slower. Actually, I think I get a nicer spread there actually. I might just take that down to 3. But that might cut them off. Yeah, so maybe 4 was the one. Yeah, yeah, is that gonna go? Yeah, it goes off. Okay, so then I can bake that. And there's our animation working. I can probably, we'll put the wind in the effectors to keep everything neat. And then the emitter, I can just hide that. And I'll probably hide that wind as well. Let's play that back. Cool. Okay, now I'm happy with the position. I'm wondering actually whether it's nicer to kind of see them kind of coming out a bit. To do that, we'd need to move, we need to rotate. So let me see if we can do a bit of rotation. Go to our master spline and I'm going to just rotate this slightly. Obviously this is going to need to be cleared because it's not going to work. Let's just, I've broken everything. Let's just press play again. Oh, You know why that is? Because we've rotated the object, but we haven't rotated the position of the emitter. So let's position that. And let's press play again. There you go. Oh, and he's just not leaving in time, so I might just hide that. Might just increase that wind to 5. You could add a bit of turbulence in. Let's just try a little bit of turbulence as well. Give it a little bit of variation. Might actually up that a lot and see what that looks like. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, so that's doing it. They're going off screen in time. So that's our animation set up. What I might do is have, so that presses, I mean, it's probably like not long after. I guess once these have left the tube, that's probably when I want this to come back up. Let's see, press. So maybe with our linear field, I might move this to maybe like here, 55 to 65. There you go. So it's kind of like it's got the pressure, it's pushing it out, and once it's pushed out, it lets the pressure off. So that is our animation set up. So now we just need to add our materials on and our scene. So let's bring in a plane, and we'll give this like 100 by 100 in the segments. Up the size. And I've done this lots of times. Let's add on a bend. I'm going to increase the strength to 90. And then need to rotate this. Oh, let's go into another view so I can see what I'm doing. Oh, rotate this through 90 degrees. And minus 90. No, I'm kind of looking the wrong way, so let's just rotate this whole thing around. Let's maybe, yeah, we'll do 180. Pull this down so that it is sitting on that surface. There we go. And turn that off. Okay, so that's all good. So yeah, I think, yeah, now we can just add on, go into Octane and add on our materials. Okay, so let's open the live viewer, the Octane live viewer. Let's dock this on one side and let's just press render to see what we're looking at. I'll go to the first frame. Obviously to start with, it's sticking out, so let's make sure that it's all in screen, and then I guess I need to make sure that my animation actually, with it in screen like that, it still actually leaves frame. Yeah, it does. Okay, because that would be bad. Okay, let's lock that so we can see it at actual size. I've got this 1920 by 1080. I'm going to set it to half just so I can kind of have a look at it. Let's set up some materials. So first thing I need to do is actually put in an Octane tag on the camera, would help. And then let's create the material. So I'm going with, on one of my Instagram setups, I kind of had this kind of pink and red. So I'm gonna plug in the numbers for that. So 13, 28, 83. This was for this kind of like diffuse background for the stage. Let's drag that on. And we'll put the materials on, then we'll put the HDR. Oh no, we'll do the HDR now. No, it makes sense. So let's just bring in an HDRI. I've just got this room HDRI. And then we can kind of rotate this. Kind of decide where the light's coming from. And maybe I'll just leave it like that for now. And then let's just set up some of the other materials. So let's create a glossy, and we'll call this one pink. So this is kind of like the main pink that I'm going to use, and we'll make this one 1644 77, so it's not far off. It's kind of a salmony pink. I'm going to add a roughness, a tiny amount of roughness, like 0.1. You could put a noise map on here or something, but for now I'm just going to do this. Oh, let's open this up so I can see all of my objects. So let's add that on to main, and then my other color I use is kind of like a red. So let's just duplicate this one because I want the same roughness. Let's call this one red, which isn't actually a red, it's kind of a reddy brown. That one is 1281 61, and I will add that onto the strap, and then we'll put that on the handle base and that handle top. On the handle top, because we added these extra little bits on, I might put a little bit on there, so just got that tiny little ring, and then I might put the silver we're going to put on here, I might put on there, so we'll put this kind of metallic on. So let's actually, let me just set to 500. Let's get a metallic material, and I'm going to add that onto that capsule, so just on the end, or maybe actually maybe we'll put that there, yeah, so we've got like a little metal ring around there, and then that nozzle, let's add that onto there. Now our arrow, I want to make that red. That center part, maybe we'll make that kind of metallic, and the face we want to be white. So let's copy this again, let's call this white, and let's diffuse. I'm not going to make it bright white, I'm going to make it like an off white, maybe a slightly yellow, and that's the face. Okay, so that's all those bits. We'll change the metallic to more of a blurry metallic, but I just want to kind of get it in the right places, so I think I'm going to put that on the cone and that kind of end part of the cone, and then under here let's just go to the roughness, and I'm just going to up the roughness on this. Let's just say like 0.2. And then if we go to the specular, oh, that's kind of what is going on there, it's freaking out. If we go to the specular, kind of bring this down to maybe darken it up a little bit. Maybe go to rough, I might even make it more rough, let's say like 0.4. Yeah, so we just kind of got this kind of very kind of buffed out kind of metal. That sky, I think I'm gonna, let's put that back to 0. Maybe we'll put a light in as well to lighten this up. Let's set up this tube, so let's create specular material, and we'll call this one tube. And let's add that on, well, to the pipe. Now for this, couple of settings, I want to turn fake shadows on, that just means it kind of renders quicker. And I'm just going to put a tiny 0.005, just like the tiniest amount of roughness on there. And then the next thing we want to do is obviously all of our particles. That's weird that is, oh, we didn't actually bake. Let's bake that. Let's play through, make sure it's doing exactly what we want. Yeah, I just want to make sure it gets off screen. Now we can rewind. It's obviously not, yeah, it's not totally matching up when we move because it's obviously the spline is trying to catch up. That's all in there. We just want to set up these colors now. So what I want to check is we had that random effector, the same one that we used on both of these spheres for the size. Under the parameter, we want to make sure color mode is on effector color. And then we want to create a new material, a new specular material, and we'll call this one spheres. And let's bring up the node editor, because we're just going to kind of use the MoGraph tag and bring in a kind of gradient of colors. So let's go MoGraph color shader, then we're going to bring in a gradient, and then we're going to take that, actually we're going to take this into the medium. So I've kind of stepped ahead a little bit here, so let's go to medium. We're going to add scattering, okay, and we want this to go into the absorption, and then we want the color. Oh, I've got the wrong gradient. There's two gradients. This black gradient is kind of like the Cinema 4D's inbuilt one. We want the Octane gradient, so that into there, that into absorption. Let's just see what we're looking at. Okay, let's just want to make sure under this else, add that material on. Let's just add that on both of these. I want to make sure that the colors will change. Now these seem to be affected, but these are not. It may be because we baked it, so let's clear the cache. Yeah, okay, so maybe we'll just bake this at the end. We'll just save it on this frame. Okay, so they're kind of all black to white at the minute, which is not what we want. So I'm going to go to gradient. Under low preset, I'm just going to get this flame 6. I just like the kind of range of colors. Obviously we're not seeing anything at the moment. That's because if we go to medium and go to, actually go into that, so we've got this density of 100. We want to take this right down probably. Let's try like 5. You know, now we can kind of see through them. Let me make it 10. Let's bring in some of that color in, 20. Yeah, I think that's enough. So we're kind of getting to see some of that color now. Make sure, did I have fake shadows turned on? Yeah, I did. Okay. So what we'll do next is add a couple of more nodes. I want to take this gradient, I'm going to take that into the scattering as well. See, so it's kind of affecting that coloring. And then I'm actually going to have some of them give off emission, like give off some light, which should help with these dark ones inside. So under emission, let's go to plugins, Octane, add a black body emission. They should all be, yeah, super bright, they're glowing. For texture, we're going to take that same gradient and add that into the texture. So they're going to see they're colored. Now you can see sort of this variety of colors, but they're too bright. So let's just take the power down to like 1. There you go. So now we can actually see they're quite nice and clean. You can see them coming up in there. Probably maybe even like 0.5. 2. Maybe we'll try somewhere in between. We'll say 1.5. Yeah. So we've got some of them that are light are actually glowing. Now we've got all those materials on there, we can bake that. Let's play that back. We'll pause this so we can just look over here. Yeah, everything seems to be working. All our colors are in there. Okay, cool. So the only thing I want to do now is probably just add in a light, because this is looking pretty dark. I might, for a start, just turn on the camera imager and see if we can play around here. I might up the exposure. I mean, this might be enough. I can turn on this highlight compression. You can kind of, those bits that are blowing out, you can kind of stop that and play around with the gamma. Kind of want it to be kind of in this like pastel-y sort of zone. Maybe I might want to add a light in over here. So let's save this. I'm just going to go objects, lights, Octane targeted area light. So with nothing selected, it's just created this target. Now I can move this light around. I want this light to be over here somewhere, just to kind of light up the back of that. far too bright, so let's take that down a little bit. Maybe we'll decrease the size. No, actually, I'm going to increase the size, decrease the amount. And that, if you increase the size of the light, see, it gives us a more blurry shadow. Yes, I think I like that. Save this. Maybe it's a bit too light over here, so I can just move this along. Maybe these are actually, there's too much light, too much emission. So let's go to the node editor. And then under the black body emission, I might put this to like 0.75. I just want it to be, it's more that I want it to kind of light up, you know, when it's in the tube, because that's kind of the problem area. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, that's cool. I think the other thing I might do is I might just make this a bit more dramatic. So I might make the this rotate around more. So go to the effectors. I'm going to go to the arrow move, and I might change this to like 270. So it's going to go all the way around, yeah, to that side. So I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to save that. Under my settings, I'll probably, let's have a look. I'll leave this at 500, see what this looks like. Doesn't look too bad. We can add on the spectral AI denoiser because everything is quite smooth anyway. And you'll see what that will do is once it's rendered, I did a whole tutorial about this, so I'll put a link above. But once it's rendered, we'll wait till D main goes green. Let me click on there. And then you can see, I don't know if you can see in the recording on YouTube, but we're getting rid, there's like noise over here. That's getting rid of it. So it might be that 500 samples is probably good enough. We've got adaptive sampling on as well. So I'll probably render this out, and that's probably me done for this tutorial. I know this was a long one, but it's been a while since I've done another long one like this, but I hope you enjoyed it. It kind of used a lot of techniques in here. I'll probably just render this out as a series of PNGs and then put it together in After Effects and then export the tutorial. So hope you enjoyed this. I will try and do another one soon. All right, I will see you next time. Bye.